It's time on the Ufologist's Guide to the Galaxy to acknowledge some legendary ufologists as we deep dive into the very first original UFO experts and whistleblowers.
Well, I've chosen a guy called Morris Jessup as my very first ufology legend, simply because he was one of the very first ufologists to bring the subject to public knowledge. It's also the very first suicide case of a man who talked about a subject he shouldn't talk about, UFOs. It's a pretty fascinating story that includes not only the Philadelphia experiment, but also anti-gravity devices and men in black. Back in the 50s, Morris K. Jessup was an American ufologist. He had a Master of Science degree in astronomy and is probably best remembered for his writings on UFOs. And boy, did he write some good stuff. Jessup wrote one of the most controversial books of the 1950s, The Case for the UFO. Now, his book focused on how UFOs fly and what is their energy source, enabling them to move so swiftly and carry out very sophisticated aerobatics such as sudden stops, fast straight twists, and so on. He went on to write a further 3 books on the subject: UFOs in the Bible, the UFO Annual, and then The Expanding Case for the UFO. Jessup has been referred to in ufological circles, good word that, as probably the most original extraterrestrial hypothesizer of the 1950s. Jessup speculated that UFOs were exploratory craft of solid and nebulous character. Jessup was also the first to link ancient monuments with prehistoric superscience, and was also the first to publicly state that good and bad groups of space aliens were and are meddling with terrestrial affairs. A copy of Jessup's book, The Case for the UFO, unintentionally became the nexus of a whole other conspiracy theory when a guy called Carl Meredith Allen, sometimes calling himself Carlos Miguel Allende, an ex-merchant marine, sent a copy of Jessup's book covered in scribbled notes to a U.S. Navy Research Institute and sent a series of letters to Jessup himself, laying out an incident Allen claimed to have witnessed during World War II, where the U.S. Navy made a ship invisible and accidentally teleported it through space, the so-called Philadelphia experiment. The Philadelphia experiment, or the Eldridge experiment, is not acknowledged as truth, but nonetheless, in UFO sources, it's absolutely true and offers a great deal of indirect proof of this. Jessup thought that gravity held the key to important solutions, or more accurately, the absence of gravity. Additionally, Jessup's books soon attracted the attention of U.S. military specialists. As Jessup published more material, he became increasingly concerned that what he was doing would have severe consequences for himself and possibly his family. He developed paranoia and a great deal of fear about being watched. He often found that various objects in his office were obviously removed from their normal positions. Jessup then received a visit from some beings that we would now refer to as men in black. Were they government agents, or perhaps even extraterrestrials? Either way, whatever they communicated to him aggravated his already upset mental state. Jessup was already quite terrified and paranoid, and this visit just simply made things worse for him. He started to see men in black suits lurking in the shadows of nearby homes, and the mail and other objects he found in his mailbox had clear indications of having been opened and resealed. In July of 1958, Jessup sent writer and researcher Ivan T. Sanderson of New York his study materials for protection. Jessup told him, in case anything should happen to me. When the U.S. Navy approached Jessup and directly requested information about his book and the anti-gravity technology it claimed, his suspicions grew. When Jessup began speaking with them, they repeatedly pressed him for information about the Philadelphia experiment. Less than 1 year later, on April 20th, 1959, in Dade County, Florida, Jessup's car was found along a roadside with Jessup dead inside. A hose had been run from the exhaust pipe into the rear window of the vehicle, which had filled with toxic fumes when turned on. The death was ruled as suicide. Even while it appeared that Jessup had killed himself, not everyone was so confident about this conclusion. For a start, the setup of the car would have been done in daylight in a public area, and yet nobody noticed or intervened. Towels had been used to seal the windows, yet it was never concluded where these towels came from. Jessup's wife denied they were the family's, and there was no sign that Jessup had recently bought them. And another interesting point. Jessup had been in a very good mood the night before and had made arrangements to meet a friend on the day he died. In fact, Jessup had requested that a Dr. Valentine join him for lunch because he had something amazing to show him. As a result of Jessup's death, Valentine was never made aware of what exactly Jessup had discovered or uncovered. Researchers are still baffled by what took place. Was Jessup assassinated because he had found out too much, or did he actually just kill himself? Sid, based on your knowledge of the case, what are your main observations?
There are some very strange facts about M.K. Jessup's death, which, over the decades, have become repeatedly questioned, I may add. Firstly, the police report did not provide any real evidence of a suicide. No witnesses were ever interviewed. The first police officer on the scene was reported as saying everything seemed too professional. There was no autopsy, no records of the event in local newspapers, and even the FBI decided against conducting a formal investigation. All very strange. After cross-checking other facts I have in my data about this case, my findings are inconclusive.
I don't buy it. Dr. P, give us a conclusion.
Certainly. Morris K. Jessup's death would get rolled into more conspiracy theories surrounding the Philadelphia experiment, with some believing that the circumstances of Jessup's apparent suicide were mysterious. The William L. Moore and Charles Berlitz's book, The Philadelphia Experiment, Project Invisibility, put forward the conspiracy theory that Jessup's death was connected to his knowledge of the Philadelphia experiment. I think there's more to his so-called suicide than meets the eye.
Thank you, Dr. P, and I concur. R.I.P. Morris Jessup. Morris is just our first ufologist to succumb to suicide. Several in-depth books have been published on the matter, including the Philadelphia Experiment Chronicles, exploring the strange case of Alfred Bielek, and an amazing book called The Jessup Dimension, from the Philadelphia Experiment, UFOs and Time Travel to Mothman, Montauk, and Murder. And finally, there is The Strange Case of Dr. M.K. Jessup. All those books are available at Amazon, and they all make for brilliant reading.
You're watching the infamous UFOlogist's Guide to the Galaxy.